Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a devastating and frankly repeating pattern of human greed and institutional silence. Now, these aren't just isolated financial footnotes, right? They are central chapters in a global story about the absolute catastrophic cost of misplaced trust. We're going to count down 5 of the most destructive financial collapses in modern history to see exactly how they were built and why, inevitably, they all came crashing down.
So, if we strip away all the complex financial jargon, the core mechanism at play here is the classic Ponzi scheme. It is literally the oldest trick in the book. You promise people a massive return on their investment, but instead of generating actual real-world profits, you just pay off your early investors using the cash handed over by the newest investors. You're simply keeping the music going until the new money inevitably stops flowing in. And here is the crucial takeaway right up front. These schemes don't actually succeed because of some super complicated math or highly sophisticated financial wizardry. Not at all. The real danger is sheer scale, absolute audacity, and the silent complicity of the very institutions that are supposed to stop them. Regulators were warned, powerful people simply looked away, and ordinary folks paid the ultimate price. Let's look at our first example.
Starting our countdown at number 5, DKM Diamond Microfinance, and a story of ultimate community betrayal. Picture this: between 2006 and 2015 in rural Ghana, a trusted, award-winning youth achiever named Martin Dell lured in farmers, traders, and teachers. How? By promising them mathematically impossible returns of 50 to 80% every 90 days. And this wasn't happening in some flashy high-rise bank. It was happening right in the community, neighbor to neighbor. While that money was being secretly diverted into Delhi's lavish private businesses, we're talking an airline, a fuel station, a whole mining company, the reality on the ground was becoming an absolute nightmare. In the town of Nkranza, an estimated 90% of the entire population had their money locked up. Schools emptied out because folks couldn't pay fees. Farms were left completely unplanted. And tragically, over 70 people died in the chaotic aftermath of the collapse. But what's truly mind-blowing here is the aftermath. After literally ruining a community, Delhi was charged with fraudulent breach of trust for just a tiny, tiny fraction of the total missing funds. And there's no confirmed public record of him doing any real jail time. By 2019, he had actually co-founded another investment company. And the ultimate punchline here? The government eventually stepped in to bail out the victims, which means at the end of the day, the taxpayers of Ghana footed the bill for his massive fraud.
Moving on to number 4. Taking the scam to the global stage.
This brings us to a guy named Sergei Mavrodi. He was a Russian mathematician turned evil marketing genius who operated a scheme simultaneously across 5 different continents. His resilience is just absurd. Back in 1994, he drew in 15 million Russians by promising 3,000% returns. When that collapsed, millions were left absolutely destitute. But instead of facing justice right away, he successfully redirected his victims' anger towards the government and literally got himself elected to the Russian parliament from a prison cell just to gain diplomatic immunity. After eventually serving a very short sentence years later, he simply rinsed and repeated the whole thing. He targeted developing nations across Africa, famously reaching 3 million users in Nigeria by promising 360% annual returns. The psychology behind this is fascinating, honestly. When Mavrodi relaunched in Africa, he didn't even try to hide what he was doing. He openly called MMM a pyramid scheme right on his own website. He branded it a mutual aid fund. Yet millions of people still handed over their money. It really showcases the immense power of hope and desperation completely overriding sheer logic. A desperation so deep that when the scheme inevitably collapsed yet again, it resulted in over 50 suicides. Coming in at number 3, Menzgold. A textbook case of what happens when regulators look away. We're heading back to Ghana for this one. An operation founded by Nana Appiah Mensah cleverly disguised itself as a legitimate gold trading firm. They plastered massive celebrities on huge billboards to lure everyday investors into buying these quote-unquote gold collectibles, promising 84 to 120% annual returns. It is absolutely baffling to see how the regulators simply watched this fraud balloon right in front of them. The Bank of Ghana issued warnings for 4 consecutive years, and in response, the company just kept slightly tweaking its name to evade scrutiny. Because the Securities and Exchange Commission delayed a forceful shutdown until September 2018, this operation grew from a minor issue into a full-blown catastrophe, swallowing over $300 million from more than 16,000 victims. Every single year of delay cost millions. 244. That is the actual number of Menzgold customers who have died waiting for justice since 2018. Suicides, strokes, families completely broken by the unimaginable stress of losing their life savings. Meanwhile, the founder sits on bail, fighting charges years later, with not a single city returned to the people he scammed.
Down to number 2. Albania, the financial scheme that literally started a civil war.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's 1991. Albania is just emerging from 50 years of super harsh communist isolation, meaning the country had practically zero financial literacy or regulatory infrastructure. To understand how 2/3 of the entire Albanian population fell for predators who eventually swallowed $1.2 billion, which, by the way, was nearly half the nation's GDP at the time, you have to look at how the fraudsters weaponized the cultural concept of besa. This is a deeply sacred Albanian pledge of honor and mutual trust. And to make matters so much worse, the government actively legitimized these frauds. Senior government officials, including the Prime Minister and the Speaker of Parliament, were literally accepting medals of honor at the anniversary events of these scam companies. This just proves the terrifying reality that extreme financial fraud doesn't always end quietly in some courtroom. When these schemes finally defaulted in late 1996, the people didn't just hold up protest signs. They took up arms. Police completely abandoned their posts. Angry citizens looted up to 1 million weapons from military armories. The Prime Minister was forced to resign, and UN peacekeepers actually had to be deployed. Over 2,000 people died in the resulting conflict. A government literally fell because of a Ponzi scheme. And finally, number 1, Bernie Madoff, the apex predator. For a top spot, we land squarely on Wall Street to examine Bernie Madoff. This guy was a respected pioneer in electronic trading, a former chairman of the NASDAQ, who somehow became the architect of the largest single financial fraud in recorded human history. The sheer scale is staggering. While the fabricated paper statements he mailed out to clients showed $65 billion in value, the actual real money completely lost was $18 billion. So how did he pull it off? He promised highly consistent 10 to 12% returns, even during massive market crashes. And he cultivated this brilliant, false sense of extreme exclusivity. You literally had to beg to give him your money. He drew in everyone from Steven Spielberg's foundation to massive global banks, all the way down to ordinary retirees. But here is the most frustrating part, highlighting the ultimate institutional failure. Just listen to this quote from whistleblower Harry Markopoulos. Markopoulos mathematically proved to the Securities and Exchange Commission that Madoff was a fraud. And he didn't just do it once. He did this 5 separate times over 9 years. He even handed them a detailed document, literally titled, "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud." Yet the SEC investigated Madoff 8 different times and, alongside top auditing firms, saw absolutely nothing wrong. It wasn't until the 2008 financial crisis sparked a massive wave of withdrawals that the whole hollow operation was finally forced to collapse. All right, let's zoom out for a second and connect the dots. Across 5 completely different countries, cultures, and decades, we can synthesize a truly terrifying pattern. This is the universal playbook for global financial ruin. Here is exactly how the trap is consistently built. First, the moment someone promises a return that defies basic math, pay attention. Second, they will always use early payments to build social trust, because seeing your neighbor get rich is stronger than any red flag. Third, they rely heavily on regulators either being completely asleep at the wheel or actively complicit. Fourth, the scheme almost always collapses due to an external shock, like a global crisis or sudden bank run. And fifth, the absolute most tragic role, the connected elites extract their money early, leaving the ordinary, powerless people holding the bag to absorb the complete damage. When you put all this data side by side, it lays bare the permanent injustice of financial crime. You have this devastating human toll on everyday folks, thousands dead from suicide, stress, or a literal civil war, contrasted incredibly starkly with remarkably light consequences for the perpetrators. Sure, Madoff died in prison, but Mavrodi died a free man, the Albanian operators largely escaped, and others are still out on bail or somehow running brand new companies today. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. Look at the sheer scale of the devastation we just talked about. Civil war, destroyed retirement funds, emptied charities, hundreds of direct casualties. Across all these ruined lives and completely devastated nations, who has actually paid a price proportional to the damage they caused? The tragic answer, time and time again, is that nobody has paid enough. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and please protect yourselves out there. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.